Welcome to the King's Table, a podcast out of Kings Hill Church in Boston where we seek to elevate the Bible over opinion, answering the questions you have. I'm your host, Jonathan Mosley. Joining us on the podcast today is Ferrer, founder of Mama Bear Apologetics. And today we're coming alongside moms who want to spiritually raise their kids to engage culture with a gospel perspective. Enjoy. Well, Hillary, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Hey, I'd love to hear from you just a little bit about your story and this organization that you founded, Mama Bear Apologetics. Could you let us in on that story and how that got started?
Yeah. So just apologetics has always mattered to me because I attribute a couple of series that my pastor did from the pulpit when I was 12 as being the thing that really solidified my faith. He went through the evidences for the resurrection, the evidences for the reliability of New Testament documents, and then just who is Jesus? You know, the C.S. Lewis trilemma: liar, Lord, lunatic, and of course now we have a fourth L turned in there, the legend. Some people say it's just a legend. So apologetics has always been important to me for that reason. And I kind of just got out of doing it for a while until I met my husband, who is an apologist. He got his MDiv and PhD in philosophy of religion and apologetics. And so I was kind of always expecting just to be the little woman that was going around with him on his speaking engagements and stuff. But there was a woman in a Bible study class at my parents' church that we were asked to come in to kind of help out, that they were talking about apologetics. And I have her story at the beginning of our podcasts, some of the very first podcasts we did. And I have her story in the beginning of the first Mama Bear Apologetics book, where she was not an intellectual. I can't remember if she went to college or not. She might have, but I mean, she was a fitness instructor. She sent her kids through Awana. She was very invested in Sunday school. She taught Sunday schools. I mean, just all the things, and brought her children up the best that she knew how. And even in college, one of her sons rededicated his life to the Lord. But outside of college, the very first boss he had told him that Jesus was Santa Claus for adults. And there was something about that concept that just switched in his mind, and he came home and said, I don't believe in God anymore. And so all of a sudden she started diving into the deep end. She started getting into the philosophy, the worldview, the apologetics, all the things. And I thought, that's an instinct right there. This is a woman who would never do this for herself. This wasn't her problem that she needed to solve, but she saw her child being threatened. And I was like, that's a mama bear. And so from then on, I had this concept of Mama Bear Apologetics just kind of going through my head. And there was a series of nights where I just couldn't sleep, and I was just writing down all these ideas. And at the end, I thought, oh, okay, Lord, who do you want me to pass this on to? This is clearly, you're commissioning somebody for this. Who is it? Who am I supposed to give this to? And I felt the Lord saying it was me. I was supposed to do it, which for some people, no, I don't have children, and my health is in kind of precarious enough to where children is not a wise decision for us, just for health reasons. But but the Lord kind of instilled in me that I have something that moms don't have, which is time to research. So at that point, I also was made aware from a friend of mine that there was an entire demographic of women who would not read something unless it was written by a woman for a woman. And at that moment, even though I'd never been involved in women's ministry, I'd never been one of the girly girls growing up, never been one of the ones that cried at movies or cooed over babies, I got obsessed with equipping moms to equip their kids. And I still am. Just some people really obsess over youth apologetics, and I guess I am tangentially. I always thought that I would do some kind of youth apologetics. The kind of youth apologetics I do is equipping the mom, because she is the one who gets all the questions first. And so if I have equipped a whole army of mama bears, then I've been the best mom that I can be.
Yeah. Wow. I love that, Hillary. If you could talk to me about the ROAR method that you use. I came across this. I really like it. And it's really to help kids fight wrong cultural ideas. If you could just talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, the ROAR method, it sounds all aggressive, but it's not. The purpose of the ROAR method is to actually learn how to engage in conversations in a way that is, I like to say, extends the aroma of Christ, not the stench of self-righteousness. A lot of people have this idea that it's very, apologetics is very combative. And I don't think that that's, number one, the way it has to be. And number two, I don't, if even if it were, that's not the way moms and women would prefer to do it. So the ROAR method stands for recognize the message, offer discernment, argue for a healthier approach, and reinforce these ideas through discussion, discipleship, and prayer. So the first one, recognize the message. I have a phrase in the second book that I repeat over and over and over again that I say, you can't refute that which you don't understand. And so recognizing the message is just understanding what is actually being said. What is the argument that's being set forth? Because sometimes it's really buried in a lot of rhetoric where you can't quite tell what they're trying to say. So you're trying to figure out what is the claim that they are making. And so this is kind of the non-judgmental, we're just collecting the facts here for recognizing the message. And then offering discernment. A lot of times people think discernment means you go out and you pick the hole, poke holes in everything you possibly can. And I just have to say that's not really a winsome way to go about things. That we really firmly believe at Mama Bear Apologetics that the most potent lies are wrapped in a majority of truth. And so what we have to do is we have to teach ourselves, and then we have to teach our kids how to look for the lies that are wrapped in the truth. So what we do first, though, is we affirm the truth. We say, what is this person's motivation? What problem are they seeing that needs to be solved? What good things can we affirm? And we can say, hey, I stand arm in arm with you on this. I see this problem. I see your heart. I see all this. And just affirm everything that we can affirm, and even say, I see how this might work in X, Y, and Z situations. And this is a great solution for X, Y, and Z situations. But then we're going to say, okay, where have the lies snuck in? Say, even though I affirm all this, I'm kind of curious about, and then you can start identifying what are the lies that have snuck in. So that is going to be what true discernment is. It's for those who are watching, this is something I do with all the mama bears that they're just the parents in general at conferences. I say, you need to teach your kids that everything is like this. It's a mixture of truth and lies. It's good and bad. What we do is we separate the good from the bad. We accept the good, reject the bad. This is like a little hand thing that you can do with kids as young as 4 and 5. Okay, what are we seeing here? What's the truth we can accept? What are the lies that are sneaking in? Okay, we're going to accept the truth and reject the lies. Which is what brings us to our argue for a healthier approach. Whatever this truth is that we have discovered, that we say we affirm this is biblical, this is God's heart, or this is an actual problem. Now we're going to take that part that we can affirm and say, what does the Bible say about this? Because a lot of times the Bible is going to already address whatever the situation or problem is. It's just going to address it in a different way than secular culture does. And it usually will address it in ways that enact lasting change and that actually solve problems, instead of just trying to kind of throw lipstick on the pig, or just cover up the problem or solve it in a way that creates more problems. The biblical way to look at it is actually going to be the way that leads to flourishing. So that's what we've done. We've recognized the message. We've separated the good from the bad. We've taken the good and say, how does the Bible already address this? And then we use that reinforce. We're going to have discussion about this. We're going to have discipleship where we actually go out and do things about it. Like say that, if someone's talking about, how do we cure the homelessness situation? We can talk about what's a biblical response, what's a secular response. And now in order to discipleship, we say, what, God has called us to individually do things. So we're going to go serve at a homeless shelter this weekend or something along those lines. And then the final thing, discussion, discipleship, and prayer. Ideological things need to be fought in the ideological realm. I mean, you counter bad ideas with good ideas. However, there are times when you are not just dealing with an idea, you are dealing with an actual spirit of something, a spirit of fear, a spirit of confusion, a spirit of narcissism, which I've seen creeping up. And so at that point, or a hard heart or rebelliousness, at that point, we have to deal with spiritual things spiritually. And that is through, on our knees through prayer. And so this kind of takes us through that whole process, not only of teaching kids how to think, but then how do we as parents then engage with them on these truths that we've just talked through with them.
Yeah, amen. And if it's okay, just to kind of be extremely practical, could you, and the host of cultural things kind of in our day and age, could you maybe give an example of that roar method with a particular topic, just kind of helping moms and women kind of parse all of those four things out?
Yeah. Okay. So let's deal with one that is kind of becoming a big thing, which is transgenderism. So let's look at the messages of transgenderism. And that is saying, I feel like I was born, as someone says, I think I was born in the wrong body. Someone says, my body says that I'm a girl, but I really think I'm a boy, or vice versa. So we have to say, or they say, I feel so uncomfortable. I'm having such anxiety that I don't know what to do. We have all these things that are mixed in. We have ideological issues mixed in. We have mental health issues mixed
Mm,
in. We have just practical things mixed in. We have politics mixed in. What's going on? We have teachers now getting involved with
yeah.
hiding things from parents. And this is just all the things. This is a big cluster that we've got going on right now. So the offering discernment, someone comes to you saying, I think we should affirm, your child has a friend that says, I think we need to affirm anyone who says that they're transgender. You start out with what you can affirm. Wow, that person must be having such a difficult time to, maybe ask them their story. What's been going on? How have you been feeling? Look into that anxiety. That anxiety is probably very real.
Mm,
It might be misidentified, but it's very real. Um, Look at the pain, look at, talk about their history. There's a lot of times there's a history of something that preceded this. Now we can start saying, okay, let's talk about some of the lies that have slipped in. Can a boy become a girl? No, like that is written in our DNA. Our bodies tell us our sex and our gender, not what's going on in our head. So we're going to say the lie is that a boy can become a girl, or that someone can be born in the wrong body. These are things that we don't believe are true. Um, or that because you have interest, because it's a girl who's interested in sports and leadership, that she's therefore and playing with trucks, that she's more of a boy. Or if it's a boy that's interested in dance and art and music, that he's actually more of a girl. That is a lie right there. It's
mhm.
telling you that to be a boy means being interested in trucks, sports,
Right.
and all these things. If that's what it means to be a boy, and we can say that's not what it means to be a boy. Being a boy is something that your body tells you, and you can bring your boyness, you can bring your masculinity into any kind of in any kind of discipline. I've seen some of the best makeup artists in the past. I've seen men who are really good at makeup artistry or at hairdressing, at dance, at music, poetry, you name it. How did they bring their masculinity into
Mm,
that? And they're going to have a unique perspective as a male in this field if it is predominantly women in that field. And same thing with a girl. You're going to bring something. Being a girl doesn't mean you like wearing pink and that you play with dolls. I hated dolls. I've never liked cooking. Like, I rejected my femininity when I was young so hard. I only
mm,
shopped in the old Navy boys section because I just did not want to look feminine at all. To me, feminine meant that you were irrational and emotional, and I was
mm.
not that. And so I was, it never occurred to me to think I was the opposite gender, but had I lived in this, in this time in
Mm,
history, I might have. Um, so yeah, this is not what it means to be a boy. This is not what it means to be a girl. You have all these broad spectrum ways that you can be masculine and feminine. So that is where we're gonna be talking about. These are the lies that have snuck in. Now we're going to argue for a healthier approach. Let's look at what the Bible says about gender. There are no gender roles specifically in terms of interests or personality that we see. In fact, Amy Davison, the one that was my co-writer on this book, she has a series of 5 boys in the Bible that every boy needs to know, or 5 men in the Bible that every boy needs to know, and 5 women in the Bible that every girl needs to know. And these are men and women who kind of defied the stereotype. I mean, you look at
mm.
David. I mean, yeah, he was a manly man going off to war and stuff, but the dude cried a lot. Let's
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
be honest. He cried a lot. He played a harp and he wrote music. You have I think it was Jacob, with Jacob and Esau was like that hunt, kill something. And Jacob was the one that was basically, he was kind of tied to mommy's apron strings. He loved to cook. He was the one doing the culinary stuff. That did not make him any less masculine. So
Mm,
how does the Bible address this? Well, the Bible gives us this broad range of masculinity and
Mm.
femininity. Isn't it good news, my child, that you can have any interests that you want and still be a girl? You can have any interests that you want and still be a boy. Isn't that good news, that you don't have to have surgery on your body because you have different interests than those around you? That's great news.
Mm.
And so then reinforce this through discussion, discipleship, and prayer. Look for times like, say, all these things that they're going to be seen with drag queen story hours. Look at the men masquerading as women. Say, is that what it means to be a woman? Does a woman have to have
Mm.
giant breasts and teased out hair and orange eyeshadow and giant lips and 4-inch stilettos? Is that what it means to be a woman? No, that's not what it means to be a woman. That person is confused, and frankly, it's a little offensive to women. Or just a lot of things that they're seeing in culture. They're probably going to have friends that are identifying as transgender. You're going to see it in movies and music, even cartoons that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
There's all these immediate opportunities to address this with them, and just asking them continually, what do you think that character thinks it means to be a boy? What does that character think it means to be a girl? Because every single time you're going to butt against gender stereotypes, where they think, because I fit into this other gender stereotype, then I am that other gender. And you reinforce that enough to where they realize that's a really dumb way to go about, because your interests can change. And all the stuff people are doing with their body, that's irreversible. This is not a wise course of action. So that's how I would apply the Roar method, with something that I think is practical and present right now in this culture that we're in.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that. I know I put you on the spot, but that is a really tangible, concrete example of the Roar method at work. And I think that can be applied to almost any cultural narrative. So thank you for that. That's great. As it comes to moms, who are really wanting to disciple their kids and to kind of bring apologetics into mothering, what fears or concerns have you come across from moms who want to engage with their kids spiritually, but maybe they don't know where to start?
Yeah. And I think probably one of the biggest fears is that they have to know everything. And it's like, if you don't know everything, then you can't even start. It's like, it just looks like this giant, one of those, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Although, for the record, I do not recommend eating elephants. But they see this giant thing, and how can I even begin to address that in my home? So one of the things that we have noticed is that as we're learning things, I always call it the lecture portion and the lab portion. So I was, I'm a science girl. So with all my classes, we would always have the lecture portion, the lab portion. So the lecture portion is where you get all that information. The lab portion is where you actually have to put it into use. And what I've found is that whenever I start studying something, and I've talked to so many other women, so many other moms, that the second they start studying something, all of a sudden they start seeing these things where they can actually put into practice the things that they're learning. So it's like, you don't have to know about all the things. Just know that God's going to be faithful, that as you're learning something, he's going to bring you those opportunities to practice it. I've heard from many mama bears who had bought the Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality. They're like, I haven't started it. And all of a sudden my kid asks me, then they list off some, question. They're like, well, I guess I better start reading this, because it's like they just got that process started. And then the Lord had said, okay, here we go. It's time to go. So just knowing that the Lord is faithful, and he's going to give you opportunity to practice what you're learning. But also that it's okay to tell your kids. And in fact, I encourage you to tell your kids, wow, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. And I recommend that every single mom have on her phone, in the notes section, questions my kids have asked about, specifically about religious stuff, because you're going to get random questions in Costco, and then you're going to forget about it by the time you get home. And so if you have a list of things that they've asked, and you say, you know what, I don't know, but let's study that together, or let me look into that. As my dad always taught me, it's not about having the answers, it's knowing where to find the answers. That is where basically your biggest benefit is knowing where to find the answers. And so just kind of being familiar with what resources are out there. I'm trying to remember the original question.
No, that's great. Just kind of where to start for
Yeah.
moms who want to engage spiritually.
Yeah, I would say start somewhere. I would say really like, I know this sounds like everybody says it's about, I really think you should start with the Mama Bear Apologetics, empowering your kids to challenge cultural lies. I think the foundation from that book, it's not that you can't read the second book first, but it'll make more sense when you read that first book. It's going to take you on this anthology of how did we get where we are now. It kind of takes us on the progression of ideas. And I think, and it's one of those things where it's not a bunch of new information. That's one of the things that I think can be intimidating for moms is they think I'm about to dump a bunch of new information on them. But what the first Mama Bear book is doing is it's showing them things they have already noticed, but they didn't have the language to talk about it. That is the number one feedback I get from that book of I had noticed all this stuff going on and I just didn't know how to talk about it. And now that I see it, I can't unsee it. And now I'm just addressing this with my kids left and right. They don't even have to work about, okay, how am I going to sit down and talk to my kids about this? Once your eyes are open to what's going on in culture, you have like 1,000 different opportunities every day to talk to your kids about these topics and given the words to really help build a solid Christian worldview before the world starts trying to pervert it with a secular worldview. That, and then I would say another one, if you just really want the basics in apologetics in terms of the resurrection and the reliability of the New Testament documents, I would say J. Warner Wallace's Cold Case Christianity to me walks you through that process so well. And there's even a kid's version that they can be reading this other version along with you while you're doing the adult version. So I would say those two resources, in my opinion, are a great place to start. And it's just something that y'all can do together. I'd say the J. Warner Wallace, that's going to be walking them through information more. I would say the Mama Bear Apologetics is going to give you language to stuff that's already going on, so you're not adding something to your schedule besides just reading the book or listening to it. It's in audio form.
Yeah, if you could talk to us a little bit about all the resources that Mama Bear Apologetics puts out. You have, I know, the podcasts and blogs on your website. You've already referenced the Mama Bear Apologetics, empowering kids to challenge cultural lies. You also put out another book, Mama Bear Apologetics, a guide to sexuality. Why, not why, but maybe kind of help our listeners understand kind of why these two were birthed. Like why these two resources at this time, and I think there's also workbooks that are attached to those two, which I think is just awesome, where they can do that. Parents can do that with the kids. If you could maybe just highlight those resources. I definitely want to get this into the hands of our parents at our church, but if you could, just talk to us a little bit about those resources.
Yeah, so Mama Bear Apologetics, the original one, empowering your kids to challenge cultural lies. We actually had a publisher reach out to us wanting us to write a book, and so I was trying to see like what was already out there for parents. And one of the things that I noticed, there was a whole bunch of stuff where it was like specific questions and answers, which I think are absolutely phenomenal. Natasha Crane's series, love her stuff about talking with your kids about God, talking with your kids about Jesus. Phenomenal series. But and even her first book, Keeping Your Kids on God's Side, goes through question answer. What I did was I took those and I kind of compiled them and I looked into there and I said, what are the worldviews that are causing these questions? Like basically these questions aren't coming from a vacuum. How can we actually undercut those questions before those questions even come? And so that was what our goal was for Mama Bear Apologetics, the first book, Empowering Your Kids to Challenge Cultural Lies, is we were looking at the questions that were already circulating and saying, where are those coming from? So we have a workbook that goes along with that. And honestly, the best way to use this workbook is to get a bunch of moms and do it together. I think most of the resources we have are best used when you're working on it with a group that you can do lots and lots of the discussion. Especially the sexuality book, I think it is so great to not only just go through it with other moms, but purposely reach out to your kids' friends' moms so that your kids and their kids' parents are both getting the same information. So they're going to hear the same thing no matter whose house they go to. We have the study guide for the first book, and then the second book, Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality. I honestly did not want to write this book. I was literally dragged kicking and screaming into writing this book. And of course I grabbed Amy and said, if I'm doing it, you're coming with me. And so that one I think is just this. Every single generation kind of has their own little dumpster fire that the youth are having to deal with, and this one's ours. Not that sexuality has ever not been a problem, but it's different right now. I mean, can we admit that it's different right now than every other generation? We never had elementary school teachers that were on board with the sexual revolution like we do now, that are actively teaching that. And so that one, we, instead of calling it a study guide, we called it the discipleship workbook. And the reason why is we have a lot of different activities that you can do with your kids. We did not have enough word count in the first book to really include as much as we wanted to include. And so the discipleship workbook is both that study guide for moms as they're doing this with other moms, but then it gives them activities to do with their kids to really, that are like analogies for the concepts that we're bringing across. Excuse me. For example, the concept of we one of our big points in the sexuality book is that sex is a married couple repeating their marital vows in bodily form. So what this is if you want to break this down, sex is basically reaffirming and repeating in bodily form a promise you've already made. So how can we get this across to kids? Well, let's find some promise that we can make to our kids. Either it could be something long lasting of like, I will always be here for you, or it could be something like, on your 10th birthday, we're going to get you a 10 speed. That was like a 10 speed bike. That was our family's thing. When you turn 10, you get a 10 speed bike. I mean, make sure it's something that you can follow through on, because that would be a really bad idea to like promise like Disney World. And then you get there and realize, oh, we're out of a job and we can't do that. And I've been like promising this for 10 years.
And you can't really repeat that, right? That's probably.
Well, no, see, this is the thing is you're going to create a secret handshake that is going to be repeating that promise. So every time I give you this handshake, that's that reminder that I will always be there for you. Or, little elbow thing. Oh, can't you wait till you're this age? When you're 13, we'll let you get your ears pierced. I don't know what it is. Something, there's a promise that you're making, and then you're putting something physical into repeating that promise to them, so that they have this category in their minds. And then later when you talk about, well, sex is a married couple with a bodily recitation of their marital vows. That makes sense to them because they've already had a bodily recitation of a vow or a promise that they've done with mom and dad in the past that's completely not sexual. So this is the kind of example of just little tidbits that we give in the discipleship workbook, walking through the difference between the different kinds of marriage and, all the things that we would have loved to have had all the details in the book, but we were limited by word count. It just is kind of some reinforcing. That's why it's called the discipleship workbook. So we have those, which I highly recommend. We've got blogs where we're just trying to see what's going on in culture and start addressing some of those. We just had a big blow up brouhaha that like crashed our server, or not our server, but the actual article itself crashed. I mean, like 20 times. But it was on the Enneagram, the origins of the Enneagram, and going through all the Enneagram stuff. We're going to have some coming out on the If gathering. We have just other questions that maybe from the past that kids might ask about who made God, or why did God create the tree in the first place? And so just lots of resources there. Our podcast started out as kind of me and another person kind of teaching through different things. Since having kind of a major surgery about a year and a half ago, I've had to step away from that. But Amy, our Mama Bear, has been doing amazing with the podcast, with really practical interviews with different people on topics that'll help you in your parenting. We have the Audio Apologetics blog, which is basically taking different articles that we think are valuable and reading them, because sometimes you don't have time to sit down and read. Basically, I think in on our original website, it was all the audio resources, and it said, be honest, you're reading this from the toilet, aren't you? Because sometimes that's like the only place moms have that's like their own, and even that isn't a guarantee. So yeah, and then we have just churches invite us. So I want people to hear this. Everybody's asking, well, can you plan an event here? Can you plan an event there? Whenever they see that we have an event coming, we don't purposely go. Well, I mean, we purposely go, but we don't say, hey, I want to go to this place. Let's make that happen. Those churches reach out to us saying, we would love to have you come speak. So if you want to have a Mama Bear coming to your area, make sure that you talk to your church and say, we want to have this speaker. We want to have Mama Bear Apologetics, and have them reach out to us, because that's how we end up doing the conferences. Is it's totally like the church is putting it on, and we come and we speak. So that's what we offer right there.
I love that. I love that. I'm still processing and thinking about that secret handshake, the reinforce of promise. That could have been so helpful, even for us a couple months ago. We had promised our girls. We have 3 girls, 1 on the way, and we had promised them, once they kind of go through a ring of Bible cards, I think there was like 30 something, that we would take them to the Great Wolf Lodge. So we spent a few months working on those verses. We finally went to the Great Wolf Lodge, but that would have been good just to kind of reinforce. So that's going to be that's something that me and my wife can actually be talking about for the future.
You could have something where it's like, whenever you're talking about that, you have a certain thing that you do. Remember when we promised this and we did this? Yeah, that was great. And then you do your little handshake. So you can still do it.
No, that's great. I love that. I wanted to ask you, for moms who are just in the daily grind, whether that be to stay at home or in the workforce, how might you counsel and encourage them that apologetics is something that they can do for their kids? We encourage moms, hey, think intersection, not addition. So not adding apologetics into their life, but think about intersecting, like just all sorts of teachable moments when grocery shopping, cooking, preparing dinner, dropping off the kids. So think intersections. But how would you counsel and encourage that? No, apologetics is something that they can do.
Yep. Well, first off, I want to say a lot of the things that we address in both of our books are things your kids are already noticing. So if you're not addressing this with them, somebody is. The most that you're going to have to do with this is educate yourself. I would say for the most part, maybe the spot that people get hung up on is having to educate themselves before they can begin talking about it with their kids, because they see it as having to have this big long speech and curriculum and stuff that they have to do with them. But really, it's about just taking the blinders off and interacting with what's already around you, because your kids don't have their blinders on. And so I would say that you have so many talking opportunities out in culture already that you're missing, that it doesn't take adding something more. It just takes interacting with what you're seeing. And we went round and round and round for the first book about the subtitle, because I had this subtitle I was kind of committed to, but they just it was like I can't remember. But when we finally ended up on the one that said empowering your kids, I feel like that has been the word that is descriptive of both of these, that I think women are afraid they're going to feel beat down, that they can't do as much as they want to. But the overwhelming feedback that I get from women is how empowered they feel to finally address this with their children. So I think if you're just worried that you're going to feel beat down, don't be worried about it. Think this is something of releasing a weight off your back, and you can take those blinders off, and you can interact with culture. You can do it, Mom. You are absolutely capable of doing this, and all you have to do is be one step ahead of your kids. And that shouldn't be, sometimes that seems like a bit pretty hard, but in a lot of ways, like as a teacher, a lot of times I knew I just have to be one day ahead of the kids that I was teaching. So I just want to encourage them that they can do it, that it's all around them. They don't have to add anything. They just have to kind of awaken themselves up to what's already around them. And second would be, start cultivating sacred space. And when I say that, I mean, we are so addicted to our smartphones that we need to say, you know what, dinner time is the time all technology goes away. We have a bucket over here. Everybody turns it off and puts it in the bucket. And this is sacred family time. Another time would be, like, I know you can't do this every time you're driving, but coming home from a movie, especially if you have little kids who have no idea how to get from A to B, and they have no idea how long it takes to get from A to B. Make that sacred time that as you're coming home from a movie, this is when you talk about what you just saw. Anytime you see something that needs to be talked about, a lot of times people will just kind of ride along in the car without paying attention to where they're going. Treat car time as a sacred space, in the sense that especially with boys, but you don't have to have that eyeball to eyeball conversation, especially when it comes to tough topics. That's hard sometimes for kids, and especially for boys. you can have whatever reaction in your face that you need to without them seeing it, which is always a good thing. So yeah, just carving out these sacred times. Maybe it's also when you put them to bed, and talking about what are you thankful for today. This is something my husband and I have done. And we found that just a whole host of anxieties are kind of cultivated by not having gratitude. And and just cultivating that spirit of gratitude actually is something that permeates the entire person. All of these are things that are easy to add into your schedule because it's things that you're already doing. It's just making time to say, this is when we're going to be still.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, Hillary, maybe one more question for you, and it's more personal. I know we're all lifelong learners, and what's an area of study that you've been diving into recently, and what insights has that given you?
Good question. Okay, let me think. So I've got one spiritual and one we'll say I've got my Bible topic, and then I have my other topics that I go into, which are usually different than others. So within progressive Christianity, there's just this rising movement of people who say, I reject anything that wasn't said by Jesus himself. And so I've been really going back, and it seems like repentance for some reason isn't in the cards. It was not apparently very important to Jesus. So I've been going back, and I want to go through the Gospels multiple times to see all the times when repentance is kind of at the forefront of the ministry that he has. Like what are the commands of Jesus? Because I think we get a lot of the theology in the Pauline epistles because he's dealing with people who weren't already Jewish. So when you're dealing with a Jewish population, you're dealing with people who already know or have some concept of the law and the Torah and the commandments of Moses and all these things that Jesus didn't really need to reinforce. But once you see with Paul, when he starts getting into the pagan civilizations, you kind of have to start at, the very beginning. So just kind of comparing those. And then I would say in my practical time, I think I've even got it right here. And this is where everybody's going to laugh at me. So I saw an article on this over Christmas, and I thought it was so amazing that I was like, I need that book. So I ordered the book, and my dad immediately, because I was with my parents at the time, started reading the book, and I was like, okay, I need to buy another one. So I bought another one, and it is The Psychology of Totalitarianism.
Oh, it's great. Great. I'm sure a light read. Yes.
Oh, yes. It's very enlightening. I would say kind of two of our big things that we're seeing coming in our culture. What number one is going to be revolving around just the sexual revolution and changing the definitions of male and female in marriage. But the second one is the encroaching upon what you're allowed to say. And this is absolutely a church topic because what Rod Dreher talks about in his book, Live Not by Lies, is there's a soft totalitarianism where we don't have the police coming after you and beat you up for doing stuff, but we do have cancel culture. But cancel culture turns into other types of totalitarianism, which we're already seeing going on in Canada. So this is just kind of talking about the psychology behind that. And it's fascinating, a little terrifying, but it's one of those things where I know that most of my mama bears aren't going to go out and purposely read a totally black book called The Psychology of Totalitarianism. But if there's ways that I can say, these are some ways to disciple your kids in order to resist what is coming, because it's going to be coming for the religious freedoms, then I would say that that's still time well spent.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, Hillary, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today and being so helpful for moms, whoever is listening. Thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining us at the King's Table today. Hope you enjoyed the discussion around raising kids in such a way where we can give them a gospel perspective to combat the cultural lies. If you'd like more information about Kings Hill Church, you can visit us online at www.kingshillboston.com.